Welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast
with Garrett Williamson.
Health, wellness, exercise, nutrition, and a whole lot more. Got questions? Call us and leave a message at 251-278-EDGE or message us at Personal Edge Fitness on Facebook and Instagram, at Team PE on Twitter, or personaledgefitness.com.
You know, there's not a single day that goes by, I'm sure, that you don't hear the words belly fat. Maybe it's just me. Maybe that's because it grinds my gears so much when I hear about special fat, belly fat. You know, back in the 80s, it was, I don't have fat on me, I've got cellulite. Belly fat is the new cellulite word. And I tell you, it's interesting because it goes along with some of the myths about fitness. And one of the big myths in fitness is how to get rid of that belly fat. And that ends up, in the fitness world, it ends up being skewed with abdominals, about working abs. You know, most people that are involved in some sort of fitness program are looking for the best ab exercise routine for developing that flat, tight abdominal muscles. Well, this is Garrett Williamson. You're listening to the Personal Edge Fitness Show, and today, that's what we're talking about. We're going to clear the air on abdominals and call this episode, all about abs. I want to break down, what are abdominals? What are your abs? What are the muscles there? What's going on with this special area called the abs? I'm going to break down and tell you the different parts of those. I'm also going to tell you the difference between working abs and getting rid of belly fat, because really they're not the same thing. There's a relationship of sorts there, but it seems like no matter how many years I've been in this, and to tell you the truth, what I tell some people, no matter what, the thought comes to, if you've got a gut, if you're feeling that extra flab, well then, no matter what, I got to do some abs. Well, I'm kind of glad about that because abdominal exercises are very, very important for other reasons, far more important than vanity. But of course, that, as I've said before, the vanity is my favorite sin. So let's break it all down for you. Let's break it down exactly what are abdominals and what do they do and how do we go after that stubborn belly fat, as one of the famous commercials says. So, well, abdominals are broken into a few different groups. You've basically got the two different types of abdominis muscles, and then you've got your obliques, and then I'm going to throw one more in there just for good measure, known as the hip flexors. Let's start with the largest, the rectus abdominis. Now, you've probably heard of that. You've heard rectus muscles or definitely abdominis muscles. Everybody knows the idea of the six-pack. When you think of a six-pack, you're thinking of the rectus abdominis. It's probably the most well-known and prominent abdominal muscle. It's the long, flattened muscle. It extends vertically between what they call the pubis. That's the meeting point of the two parts of the pelvic muscle. And it goes all the way up from your pubis all the way up to your xiphoid process. Or if you're talking from the top to bottom, the xiphoid process, that little bony structure, it's right where if you do CPR, they tell you to put your hand in that area because that's where your heart is. The rectus abdominis runs, if you're going from the top to the bottom, you go from the xiphoid process. Now, the xiphoid process, if you look at a skeleton, think of a skeleton, and you look at the rib cage, the top where the rib cage meets in the center of the chest, there's a little bony part that kind of sticks down, looks like a point. That's known as the xiphoid process. And your rectus abdominis starts just underneath that, and runs all the way down to where I was saying earlier about your pubis, or where those two pelvic muscles meet. And it's that, like I say, the six-pack. The reason you get that six-pack look is there's a strong tendinous sheath. It's called the linea alba. I don't know if you really want to know that. These are the white lines that divide the rectus abdominis down the middle. And there are three more horizontal lines that go across the same type of tendinous sheaths. They give that familiar washboard look. It divides it into three sections on each side. That's why they call it the six-pack. And what this muscle does, what the rectus abdominis does, it helps to flex the spinal column, basically narrowing the space between the pelvis and the ribs. So like you think of a crunch. When you're trying to collapse your body, you're trying to bring your chest into your legs. That's what your rectus abdominis does. It actually collapses it. It shortens that distance between the pelvis and your chest, and it actually flexes the spinal column that way. And typically we use crunch-type exercises to work the rectus abdominis. Simple exercises like the ball crunch, or just simple crunches that when you're laying back on a mat and just crunching your shoulders forward or rolling your shoulder blades up off the mat and just collapsing. I like my clients that are worried about their gut. They don't like seeing themselves in that particular position because they're making that fat kind of push up a little bit. Well, that's when you're firing the rectus abdominis, is that crunch-type motion. Now then on the sides, And these run just on the front side of the body in front of the latissimus dorsi, your big Mike muscles. You've got your obliques. The external obliques are the pair of muscles that are located on each side of your rectus abdominis. The muscle fibers of the external obliques run kind of diagonally, downward and inward from the lower ribs to the pelvis, kind of form the letter V. And you can find where these muscles are. You can locate them by putting your hands in your coat pocket. When you put your hands in your coat pocket, you're basically resting on your external obliques. To get real technical with it, they originate at the 5th to 12th ribs and insert in the iliac crest. Now, in other words, they connect. They start at that 5th to 12th rib. It's kind of a wide type muscle. And then it goes down and connects to the top of your pelvic bone. We call that the iliac crest, and that's where it actually connects. What these muscles do, the external obliques, they allow flexion of the spine, just like the rectus abdominis. They allow some flexion of the spine, but it's mostly in like kind of the rotation. You can do side bending, where your rectus abdominis actually bends you forward. Your external obliques bend you side to side. Again, they compress the abdomen, but they mainly compress the abdomen to the side. They also control your rotational movement, how you actually turn side to side. I mean, like rotating your shoulders. If you want to, you're in your car and you want to turn and look over your shoulder to see if anybody's coming so you can enter into traffic, you actually fire your external obliques to help rotate you that way. Now, the opposite of this, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about the importance of abdominal exercises. Every muscle has an opposite muscle. Muscles don't push, they pull. So if you have a muscle like a rectus abdominis, pulls you forward, but it doesn't push you back. The external obliques, the right side will tilt you one way, and the left side will tilt you the other way. That's kind of the opposing muscles. You also have opposing muscles with the external obliques. They're known as the internal obliques. Now, this muscle is a pair of, they're real deep, the deep muscles. You have what we call superficial muscles. Superficial muscle, like on your shoulder, would be your deltoid. That's that big muscle you feel on the outside of your top of your shoulder. And if you rub the outside of your shoulder, you're actually touching the deltoid. You can push and you can actually feel it. What you can't feel is pushing on top of that deltoid. Underneath that deltoid is a rotator cuff. You can't really put your finger on that. Well, internal obliques are sort of like that. They're a little deeper. They're just below the external oblique muscles. They're actually at right angles to the external obliques. They connect to the lower ribs, and also they connect to the iliac crest, and they actually go and kind of meet up with the back muscles called the erector spinae. Don't worry too much about those muscles, but that particular muscle is going to come into play a little bit. They do similar action to the external obliques. They are involved in flexing the spinal column, sideways, bending, trunk rotation, compressing the abdomen sideways and whatever. But because of their unique alignment at right angles to each other, the internal and external obliques are referred to as opposite side rotators. This goes to what I was saying a minute ago about the fact that each muscle has an equal and opposite muscle. Now follow me on this. When the trunk rotates left, the external obliques on the right contract. When the trunk rotates right, the external oblique fibers on the left activate the movement. So that's what they mean about opposite side rotators. But you also got, like I say, there are opposing muscles also. But any kind of turning motion, those are your obliques, those outer muscles, they're the ones that control rotation. That's really what you need to focus on as far as that goes when you're doing your abdominal exercises. Anything that you rotate, bicycles, when you're doing bicycles, when you're doing any kind of a twisting motion. Let's say you're doing a crunch and then you're doing an elbow to knee. You're doing that crossover, right elbow to left knee crossover. That's firing your oblique muscles, those outer muscles. So now, one that's made a lot of news lately, and this is sort of like what I was talking about, belly fat being the big buzzword right now. This particular abdominal muscle, this next abdominal muscle, has made the headlines, and people have talked a lot about transverse abdominis. Now, it's a very important muscle. It's very close to the spine, but it's not the be-all, end-all, and cure-all. Just like years ago when we heard, well, to do ab exercises, you better be moving your legs. In fact, only exercises you should be doing are moving your legs, because that fires the quote-unquote lower abs. When we're talking about lower abs, we're actually talking about rectus abdominis, and it's one abdominal wall. Well, lately, transverse abdominis has burst onto the scene and been prevalent for a while. Well, what is this? Now, this is the deepest layer of abdominal muscles that wrap around the torso from front to back and from the ribs to the pelvis. The fibers run kind of horizontally, similar to, think about a weight belt. Ladies, think about a corset. And that's kind of what the transverse abdominis and where it's positioned. And again, it's a deep muscle. And that's why it's gained so much popularity, because planks, any kind of isometric type exercises, typically fires your transverse abdominis. Very important. Don't let me confuse you by belittling the popularity of it. It's a very important muscle, mainly because it's so tight to your spine, but it's not the be-all, end-all, and cure-all. And I say that because of how many clients I've had come in and tell me, well, I heard you're not supposed to do crunches anymore. That's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do planks. And there's several variations of the planks, and the planks are very important. But you still got to fire your rectus abdominis. You still got to fire your internal and external obliques. They are somewhat involved in a plank-type motion, but you're really working that transverse abdominis very hard, and you should. It's one you should work. Again, it has so much to do with spinal control and protecting that spine. But don't neglect the other exercises by any means. So.
And I heard rectus abdominis is going to be in the new Transformers movie.
I wouldn't doubt it.
That.
So I think that. So. I think the rectus abdominis is a dump truck. Is that right? It's going to transform something like that. Yeah, I know that character. Definitely so. And before we get to the opposite side, I'm going to throw one more in. It gets thrown into the mix as far as abdominal muscles are concerned. It's not really an abdominal muscle, but you end up firing this group of muscles when you're doing abdominal exercises or crunches and stuff like that, especially if you've got your feet hooked under something for doing sit-up exercises, you're hooking your feet under something, or if you're in a set of like ab straps or a Roman chair, anything where you're pulling your knees up towards your chest. And that's what's known as the hip flexor. Now, I bring this up. It's not really an abdominal muscle. It's more of a hip muscle. But it's so extremely important, and I know that when I'm talking about this, usually people are interested in that muscle, interested in that area, so we might as well cover it because I want you to keep that in your repertoire as far as your workout is concerned. And mainly for different reasons than you think that don't really have to do with the abdominals, more for walking and protecting the hip. Now, the hip flexors are a group of muscles that bring the legs and trunk together in a flexion movement. So they basically bring your legs kind of up. And when you're walking, what brings your knee up is your hip flexor. That's the flexion. That's why it's such an important hip muscle. And like I say, they're not technically abdominal muscles, but they do facilitate movements during several ab exercises. I mentioned them before. But unless you're really, really interested, you want to write these down, you're welcome to, but just so you know that I know what I'm talking about. And you may have heard some of these things from your physical therapist. If you've gone in and you've had back pain or whatever, a lot of times they'll check your hip flexors. And your hip flexors are, since they're attached to your hips, attached to your pelvis, when they get weak, they get tight. Now, I've said this before. I said this in my episode on muscle, in episode 8, when I talk about muscle maintenance. I talk about a strong muscle is a flexible muscle. The third most flexible athlete behind a gymnast and a dancer is a power lifter. So the stronger a muscle is, the more flexible it is. When your hip flexors get weak, the way they connect from the back of the pelvis to the front of the body. They basically kind of bisect the body. And so when they get weak, they cause your pelvis to slightly rotate. And by doing that, it pulls on your lower back. It can pull on your back and cause problems in your back. It can also cause problems walking. You may have had a time when you've been walking across a flat floor, usually a carpet, and all of a sudden you trip for no reason. And besides feeling incredibly intelligent for tripping on absolutely nothing, what you've got there is you've got a tight hip flexor. And working that hip flexor is very important. But what I said earlier is to let you know what the muscles are that make it up, and you may have heard these muscles before: the psoas major, the iliacus, the rectus femoris, pectineus, and the serratorius. Don't have to write those down. Iliopsoas is something you hear a lot because they talk about the iliacus and the psoas major working together. They call it the iliopsoas group. But that's what makes up the hip flexor. And anytime you're doing those exercises where you've either got somebody holding your feet or you've got your feet underneath something and you're sitting up, or if you're bringing your knees or your legs up towards your chest, working those abdominals, trying to work those abdominals, you're going to engage the hip flexor. The hip flexor is definitely going to be involved. Okay, guys, only one time today have I taken a drink of my water, and I kind of slapping myself for that because I'm right at 96 ounces, and I really need to get going because I'm getting a little bit behind. But you hear me drink, I want you to drink. I always want you to stay hydrated. It is the magic pill. It is a wonderful solution. I want everybody to stay hydrated. The Mayo Clinic, several of the National Institute of Health all recommend at minimum 90 ounces a day. 70% of America doesn't drink enough water. I want everybody to stay on top of your water no matter what. Stay hydrated. Now, I've taken a lot of time telling you about muscles. I'm going to tell you about one other that's very important, because something that you've probably heard is talking about protecting your back. Doing abdominal, you got a back problem, you should work your abs. Don't get me wrong, that is true. And all the abdominals, not just the transverse abdominis, that wraps around the spine, keeping that strong is very important. But you've also got some other muscles that are highly neglected. And if you keep strengthening your abs and you don't strengthen the muscles that oppose those abs, then you're going to end up with more back problems. The reason I say that is that you've got muscles on your back. The abdominals are pretty much in the front. They're attached to the sides a little bit, but they're pretty much to the front. But you've got an opposing muscle. You've got a couple of them there. You've got one called the quadratus lumborum, and you've also got the erector spinae. And the erector spinae is this kind of triangular-shaped muscle. It's very flat, and it attaches to your spine, and it basically starts at the top of your rear end and goes up to about, not quite mid-back, but just below the middle part of your back. And it fans out to the sides and actually is there to protect your spine. So if you're doing abdominal exercises, which I hope you are, then you want to make sure that you're working that erector spinae. You can do that simply by, you've probably done these before, laying on a floor, laying on a mat, and you pull yourself up into what we call the Superman, where you're laying on your stomach and you pull your chest up off the floor, or you pull your legs, keep your legs straight, and you pull your legs straight up off the floor, and you put yourself in sort of an arch position. We call it Superman. Some people call them porpoises or dolphins. That's work your erector spinae. There are back extension machines that work the erector spinae. There are body weight hyperextension machines that work the erector spinae. And something that you ought to keep in your routine as far as maintaining your back strength and maintaining your good opposing strong muscle to the abdominal muscles. Now, there was a lot of information I know. We got rectus abdominis, external obliques, internal obliques, transverse abdominis, hip flexor, and erector spinae. Okay, I think I've covered all the muscles. But what I told you I was going to talk about is everybody is searching for this ab routine. What's the best ab routine? And I would love to think, that everybody's doing that for health reasons. I hope you're keeping up, because I am too. I need everybody drinking on your water. Now, I'm rapidly approaching 100 ounces, and I hope if that's not on your schedule, that you start to slowly put it on your schedule. 100 ounces every single day. But what I was going to talk to you about was not just strengthening this muscle. I'm going to talk to you about what everybody's really worried about, and that is that belly fat, that stubborn belly fat. How do I get rid of the belly fat? Well, the reason I say that doing crunches, doing abdominal exercises doesn't really do a whole lot for that area. Well, it works that area, it strengthens that area, but the fat on top, well, that's what's known as spot reducing. I'm going to move this area and I'm going to make that area slimmer. That's a very popular misconception, and honestly, there's a lot of media out there, magazines and even podcasts that love to talk about those fantastic exercises that give you that flat, trimmed, flat stomach. And they know that people believe that exercise is going to somehow reduce the fat on your stomach, but that's not what it's going to do. It's going to work the muscle underneath. The fat that you see on the stomach is just like your fat in your hips or fat on your shoulder. Think of fat, basically a gas tank that's stored all over your body. That's what it is, and the reason that some of us have it more in our stomach, and I have so many people that come in and see me and they sit down and they grab their stomach and shake it. This is the area I need to work out. Everything else is great. Well, that happens to be the area where your maker decided that's where you're going to store most of your fuel. It doesn't matter how much you move that area, just because the tire happens to be near the gas tank doesn't mean the gas tank's going to you're going to run gas out of it a lot if you spin that right tire or that right wheel in your car. It's the same thing. If you're working the abdominals underneath it, you're not really going to drain that tank. You're not really going to make that area flatter because of it. Now, you're going to strengthen the abdominals. What is that going to do? Well, to give me that washboard look, as long as we can see through the fat, it will. But it is a big muscle group. Your abdominals are like the third largest muscle group in your body. So, and you remember me talking about muscle. You also remember me talking about metabolism and how your body actually burns calories. Every time you burn 3,500 calories, you're burning a pound of something. And so muscle sitting there, I talked about this in the muscle podcast. If you happen to miss that one, It's the muscle maintenance, episode 8. I've spoken about it already today, but episode 8 on muscle maintenance. Go back and review that one. It'll tell you about how your muscles develop and how they actually burn calories. They burn a lot of calories. That's why you can burn calories at rest. I talked about this in the metabolism episode also, the myths of metabolism, which was episode 6. But I talked about how when you have more muscle in your body, you burn more calories. Well, when your abs are stronger, just by them existing, they're going to burn more calories. Therefore, you're going to help burn fat in that area. If you want the exercise that gets rid of belly fat, well, if there were one exercise that got rid of belly fat, then I would pick an exercise that works the biggest muscle. Why? Well, as I said in episode 8 of my podcast, the stronger a muscle is, the more calories it burns. It'll burn calories at rest. This is how we increase our metabolism. I talked about speeding up metabolism. Well, this is how you speed up your metabolism. We create what I call more positive tissue, like muscle. And by creating that muscle, it's going to take calories just to exist. It's going to constantly metabolize. It's going to require energy in order to exist. Therefore, it's going to burn more calories. And the largest muscle in the body, the one that would burn more calories than your abdominal muscles as far as belly fat is concerned, well, it happens to be your rear end, the good old gluteus maximus. You keep that one strong, you're going to burn more calories. And I'm all for the importance that people put on abdominal exercises. I almost think it was kind of a funny head fake that we do, because people believe that it makes their stomachs flat by working their abdominals. Well, actually, what you're doing is you're actually making yourself live longer, because you're strengthening your abdominals. Therefore, you're protecting your back. Therefore, you're protecting that is known as your core. And if you don't think you use your core very much, break a rib or pull an ab muscle, and you'll find out how much you use your abdominals just sitting in a chair. And so I like the fact that we're maintaining the strength there. And if you want to, like I said, if you want to find the muscle that burns the most amount of fat, well, work those glutes. And again, I'm a fan of that, not only for the fact that it burns fat, but I'm a big fan of it because it keeps you alive. Because if you lose your legs, you lose your life. And if you can't get up and walk around, you've got more of a chance of breaking your hip if you don't have that kind of protective muscle there. Therefore, incidence of mortality, you've heard me say this before, incidence of mortality jump by 2/3 with the first hip fracture. So the stronger the glutes are, the stronger that rear end is, the more calories you're going to burn, the more of that stubborn belly fat you're going to get rid of, and also the more your hip's going to be protected. I talked a lot about abs, but everybody's really interested in getting rid of the belly fat. So why don't we go ahead and throw out some ideas that I've thrown out before, but I'll tell you some other ways to help get rid of that stubborn belly fat, help you get that six-pack look. After you've maintained your abs, make sure you're doing plenty of aerobic exercises, walking, running, swimming, this kind of thing. This is burning excess energy. Therefore, anytime you spend about 15 minutes in a cardio session, once you hit the 15-minute, you're pretty well going to fat stores. That's where you're getting your energy. You're starting to burn fat at that time. So aerobic exercise, past 15 minutes, fantastic way to burn excess calories, therefore burn off that belly fat. What you eat is important, but how much is our real concern. Making sure you understand the amounts of food that you're eating. Because belly fat is your body's way of saying, hey, I got a lot of excess food here. And your body looks at that excess food and goes, you know what? Since he or she gave that to us, since that person gave that to the body here, then we better store it. We must be going on a hike and we're not going to get any energy for a while. We're going to store that energy. We're going to store it down here in the belly. That's where we're going to store it. And that's what fat is. It's excess energy. But we only get that excess energy. See, hear what I'm saying? Excess. That's not a type. That's an amount. So control your amounts. Control your amounts. And how do you know your amounts? Easy. I've talked about this before. But track it. Track it on MyFitnessPal. It's a fantastic app. They lose it. There's a few others that out there. Livestrong has an app for it. But my favorite is MyFitnessPal. It's a free app, and you can log in what you're eating and how much you're eating, and you can keep an eye on those calories. You can find out whether or not your body is taking in more calories than it's expending, and therefore whether or not you're actually telling your body to store excess body fat. If you're wondering about what to eat, well, the one thing I recommend this. Had somebody call in and ask, what should I eat every single day? Is there anything I should eat or drink every single day? And by the way, if you have any questions, don't think twice about giving us a call. Our phone number is 3343. That's a voicemail. Leave your questions or comment. Also, where you're calling from. We definitely address it on the show. We look forward to it. But somebody called in with the question of, is there anything that I should eat or drink every single day? And my answer is absolutely. One I've already mentioned. You know what it is. It's a favorite. Stay hydrated, folks. Water. The magic pill. 100 ounces a day. Drinking plenty of water. Definitely want to have that one on board. That is the key to staying young. The other key to staying young, the answer to the fountain of youth, the answer for helping maintain body fat, protein. The answer to the what you should eat every day, like I said, just the water, but the other side of the fountain of youth is protein. You want to have protein. How much should you have? Well, you should have protein every meal, every day. You want to find out the actual caloric amount? Easy. Track it through MyFitnessPal. Control those amounts, and you'll control that excess body fat. One other thing for getting rid of excess body fat, on top of the abdominal exercises, on top of doing the glute work that I said earlier, or any kind of resistance training for that matter, fiber. Making sure that you have plenty of fiber in your diet is extremely important. Extremely important, period, for your diet, also for your health, but also as far as helping you get rid of belly fat. You should definitely take in fiber, and the reason that you want to make sure you have plenty of fiber is that the fibers, they bind to water and they form this thick gel that basically sits in the gut. It fills you up. It fills you up and eventually passes through, but it fills you up. It does help you process as far as keeping bowels moving consistently and what have you, but it can keep you filled up and help you from overeating. Taking in too many calories, going back to your cueing your body, keep your body from being told to store excess body fat, to store that excess energy. Anything you can do to help fill yourself up, the less likely you are to overeat. Now, just some tips I threw in there for getting rid of that stubborn belly fat, since I brought it up at the very beginning. This podcast is actually about the abdominals, and I don't want you to neglect the importance of maintaining those muscles, making sure you're doing a good variety of exercises, something that crunches the body forward, something that works the transverse abdominals by some sort of isometric movement like a plank, and doing something where you're twisting or turning. A good rule of thumb on that is use a variety. I typically like to recommend 3 exercises, and it's a very, very complex muscle, but you need high repetitions. You don't need to work 10 different ab exercises. It's like most any other muscle group, a couple, 3 exercises, and that's about all you need. But I would do something where you're crunching. I would do something where you're twisting. I would do something where you're doing some sort of an isometric, and you're working that rectus abdominis. Off the top of my head, starting off with a plank, a rectus abdominis, or finishing off the top of my head, I would say start off with some sort of a lower body movement where you're firing those hip flexors, and you're working that rectus abdominis, where you're rolling your hips. Laying on a mat, pulling your knees towards your chest and rolling your hips off the mat slightly. Bring your feet back down to the mat and keep repeating that. That's a simple exercise. Start there. Once you finish that, go into a basic crunch. Make sure you hear a lot about where I should put my hands in a crunch, or where I should put my hands on a sit-up. Should I put them behind my head or my neck? The main thing you're trying to do there is you're trying not to pull on your head, because that can hurt your neck. Most of the time I tell people cross your hands across your chest. Now, you'll feel some strain in your neck, but what's happening there is you're just strengthening those neck muscles to hold that head still. You shouldn't be causing any damage to your neck whatsoever. But a simple crunch. Just bringing your shoulder blades off the mat, rolling up a little bit, bringing your shoulder blades off the mat. Simple exercise. Good high repetition, 20 to 25 reps. And then finishing the whole abdominal routine with a plank. Just a simple plank. Elbows down on the mat. In the push-up position, except your elbows are down. Toes are on the mat, and hold it for a good 30 seconds, minute, 2 minutes if you can. And that's a fantastic little plan for working your abdominals. No need to go to 10, 15, 20 exercises on abdominals. You're not going to reduce that belly fat anymore. You're just going to kind of overwork the muscle. Just keep the repetitions high and keep the variety in there. Well, that's been pretty much everything you need to know about abdominals and their relation to belly fat. I don't want you to miss out on the message here of making sure you're keeping those abdominals strong, and the fact that if you really want to get rid of belly fat, control those amounts, watch those calories, keep that protein intake up, and most importantly, folks, stay hydrated.
Thanks for listening to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast with Garrett Williamson. Subscribe now and be a part of the show by calling 251 888-278-EDGE or message us on Facebook and Instagram at Personal Edge Fitness or at Team PE on Twitter, and visit us at personaledgefitness.com.